Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! It was a pleasure to beat you.
Round two.
Ready.
Range laser bounce. Shot. Speed shot. Health shot.
So everybody's heard the Pong story. Probably everybody's heard the Pong story, but I've heard it many times, and from Al Alcorn himself, who designed Pong. So,
the story I've heard is that they installed one of the first Pong machines in a tavern and let people play it as a test.
Put it out into an arcade and see if it makes money. I mean, that's the market research.
My understanding was Ted built a cabinet, a tabletop, simple cabinet over the weekend. And a coin mech bolted to the side of the cabinet, tabletop type of big thing was sit on a barrel.
Placing a interactive video machine somewhere and having people play it was still a relatively new concept. Nobody knew if it was going to go.
Oh, what is the name of the bar in Palo Alto?
San Jose?
No, it was Andy Capp's.
It was Santa Clara? Sunnyvale.
So we'll put it in Eddie Caps. You know, it's a coin-op game, be it fragile and humble, and so we did.
Well, my memory is that he gets a phone call, the game's busted, which of course is the usual thing you get on a support line. It doesn't work. What is it, and in what way does it not work? Well, it doesn't work.
The bar owner or manager at the time kind of yelled at them and like accused them of their game being shoddy because it had already broken down and it was no longer functioning or working.
And they get a call, you know, later on that night and like, hey, this thing broke, you know. Come and pick up this piece of shit game and get it out of here. You know, this thing broke. You know, I'm not going to waste my time fixing this crap.
But anyway, the machine, we got the word that it stopped working, and I figured it could be anything, and I'd go out there and take a look at it. And so I went to the machine, and the first thing you do is you want to try to play the game, because the machine was on in a tracked mode, so it was working, but you couldn't start a game. So you open up the coin box to basically flip the micro switch to give yourself a free game, because I'm not going to waste a quarter, you know.
And so they went down to see what's wrong with the machine to fix it, and what they found out was that it wasn't broken. It was just that so many people had played it, they'd filled the coin box with quarters, and it was jammed, and it couldn't take any more.
So many people had played it that it couldn't accept any more money.
The game is broken because it's stuffed so full of quarters.
Completely stuffed with quarters.
And it was a small, I remember it was kind of small, if I remember. It was a small space. It just filled up with the quarters, and it wouldn't take it.
When I opened up the coin mech, you know, all these quarters just gushed out. So, whoa, that's impressive.
It's the equivalent of like crashing a server. When you launch a new website and it's so popular. So they crashed the server on Pong.
And one of the other reasons it was also so popular is because you could play it with one hand while you're still holding a pint in your other hand. And that also was one of those things that, you know, eventually many, many years later led to the rise of the fun barcades that we have, you know, and we can enjoy now.
As Al will always say with a little, you know, twinkle in his eye, he goes, "This is a problem I can fix."
Basically, the way it worked was you take the money, the deal you have, and you split the take with the owner of the bar. And so I did that, and I had this sack of quarters, and the next day I come into work, and I said, I got the machine fixed, and here's the problem. The goddamn thing's making too much money. And they'll went, really?
But it was one of those great moments where something that supposedly was failing was actually such a huge success that no one could recognize. It was truly the ugly duckling version of technology.
Because remember, Nolan thought, he was like, this is just a placeholder until we get to design the really good game, because who's going to play this stupid shit-ass game?
They went on to produce all of these classic, memorable arcade titles for years that allowed the company to survive and be so much more than a one-hit wonder. So that's my understanding of the history of Pong.
It's a great story if it's true.
When a story is good, you know there's some doubt about it. Like, well, that's too good to be really true. It's probably a boring version of it that's actually true.
You know, it sounds realistic to me. You know, I mean, I've kind of seen that happen in my own. And when you do get a really great game, the coins will just overflow, and you know, it's kind of a cool feeling.
Anyway, that's how that all happened. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, Atari really, why were they in the pinball business? You know, here they had this tiger by the tail of video games, you know, just this supernova of creativity and possibilities. And, you know, they were nailing it left and right, creating new genres every other week. Why would you mess around with pinball? You could tell our games were just not working, you know, and due to reliability, poor engineering, you know, thermal issues, issues of the games just falling apart, poor hardware design. I could see the writing was on the wall that we were going to go down. I mean, the pinball division was just a massive disaster. I mean, it was, it's kind of the, kind of the hubris of, I guess Silicon Valley, even in that era, was like, oh, these morons in Chicago, they make these crappy old games, we're going to redesign everything. We're going to put the display down in the bottom. We're going to, put the boards, underneath the play field so all the crap falls in and shorts out the things. And I mean, it was really horrific design, and they caught on fire. And, the solenoids, they used this thing called rotary solenoids, which burned up and the screws fell out. And, it was kind of a, just a complete disaster as far as like design and also testing. And so there was a lot of games that caught on fire in the early days. So, but they made a lot of money when they were working. The programming was awesome because I did it.
You will hear stories of hot tubs in the lobby and drug use in the office. And I'm here to tell you that none of that happened in my department.
We started smoking pot right in our office. Rob and I were like the premier pot. Sorry, Rob. I and some other person who occasionally shared an office with me for 5 years at Atari, however that frickin' worked, we would just fire up right in the office. It's like, who knows why? It's like, this is like, it's illegal. It's like, it wasn't even a sense of privilege. It was just mindlessness.
I worked in a satellite office. I started in 1977, which was still pretty early. It was only 18 months since the 2600 came out. But there was no hot tub in the lobby of the office that I went to. There was no drug use in Atari, though I don't doubt that it was over where Howard and Todd Fry were working.
Drugs were consumed at Atari by all kinds of people at all levels of management, from the bottom to the top and all over engineering. Not everybody did drugs, but some people did, and some people enjoyed them, and some people abused them, and some people went to the hospital on them. And but by and large, drugs were a relatively nominal factor. Drugs, you know, there was a lot of marijuana, and it would participated a lot in brainstormings. So we had the way of, you know, trying to incorporate drugs into our productivity model.
I went home and I smoked a joint, a little bit of cocaine and a little bit of psilocybin in it. And I was sitting there, it was about half gone when I realized, oh, you could do that. And it's like I put it out and I went and I wrote a page of notes. And my design for that kernel was exactly what it ended up shipping. It was like, it has a tremendous amount of effort, actually, to get everything organized.
You know, they did have good deliveries of cannabis in the inter-office mail. You know, that was probably the primary use of those yellow manila envelopes. I think it was, you know, Fridays or Monday. I think it was Fridays when you get these really thick envelopes coming through the system. And, you know, and it was weird. There was a guy working there, and his job was he was the weed dealer. You know, that was his sole job at the whole company.
And there was a very straight German VP of hardware down the hallway in the building. I have no idea. He complained to management about the smell of pot smoke in the corridors. So they got him an office in a different building.
I have been asthmatic since I've been 12. I need drugs to breathe. I did not do drugs because drugs to me were something that let you get up in the morning, you know, and breathe. So and nor did I think I wanted to mix those things. The high of me was doing the work, and I was always a happy guy. So I just didn't feel I needed it. So I never did drugs, but there were a lot there.
Don't put too much stock in the fact that every Atari employee was stoned out of their minds while making games.
I mean, there was all kinds of drugs consumed at Atari, but the real drug at Atari was going into a store and seeing your product, seeing your game on a shelf.
The entire reason that Atari created the Atari 2600 home console was to put their arcade hits into the home. If we can sell home versions of our arcade hit games into the home, we can sell millions of them instead of just take quarters from the thousands of people who go to arcades. And so the hardware was designed to make it possible to play tank and pong. That's about all that they did in the hardware.
So the distinction is this. CoinUp gets to use more expensive hardware. They get to use tons and tons of hardware, and they get to refresh their hardware all the time.
I had played an Outlaw-like game in the arcade. I think it was Midway. And you know, I was just told to make a game, so I said, well, here's an idea, two guys shooting at each other. And so I made that game. My goal is to try to make it like the arcade game, so I could look at the arcade game and say, this is what it has to do. So there really wasn't any need for me to have communication with the arcade guys. I'm particularly proud of the Atari 2600 Canyon Bomber because it also has the Atari arcade game Depth Charge in it. So it turns out that in a 2K byte Atari 2600 cartridge, I simulated both Canyon Bomber and Depth Charge, which were probably $3,000 arcade game hardware.
When I was young, when I was little, I remember there was this drugstore, and in their comic book rack, they had these abridged versions of great literature. You'd read it, and it was the whole story of Treasure Island. War and Peace, a comic book. But that whole notion of an abridged version, that is what was going to happen.
When I did Donkey Kong, I had, not surprisingly, absolutely no contact with Nintendo. Coleco was able to get me a machine. So I had a machine that I could play and look at, and I had already played the game. And like David said, with Canyon Bomber, the game is the spec. Frankly, the hardware is so different in its capabilities that I can't think of any value I would have had getting in touch with anybody at Nintendo. It's like talking to the guy who created the Porsche Carrera about making a bicycle. I mean, it's like, there's not a lot there. Not a lot you're going to tell me. Here's this masterpiece and do it on this toaster, you know. And I was young enough and stupid enough to not be intimidated. And I wasn't, because I was just a kid. And I was like, no big deal.
So one of the first questions they asked me at Atari was, what do you want to work on? So I just said to him, I said, what's the dirtiest, most basic elemental system that you have? And he goes, oh, well, that's the VCS. And I said, well, that's where I want to start.
I mean, the constraints on the programmers were worse than I ever even imagined were possible.
2600 doesn't draw a screen. It doesn't draw anything. What it does is it has these little logic devices, these counters and shift registers that say, this is the start of the screen, this is the left side of the screen. the electron beam is moving to the right. I'm going to count. I know how fast the electron beam is moving. I'm going to count until the electron beam is somewhere on the screen, and then I'm going to change the color on the screen for a little itsy bit.
There's only one console where you have to think about the electron gun moving across the screen and what machine cycle you're on and when you can show stuff on the screen. That's such a fun and unique and annoying challenge that it really hooks you.
It's the most fun I've ever had making a game. What do you say, Dave?
Fun might not be the word. It is the most challenging thing you could do. When we were doing it at Atari and at Activision, there were fewer than 100 people in the world who could do what we were doing. And that in itself was, very positive, very uplifting. It's really a sense of accomplishment. If you can create something that, a million people love on this horribly limited piece of hardware, you've created something. You have a sense of accomplishment.
And there are very few things more technical challenging than trying to get a game out of the VCS in the first place, because the VCS was a very technically limited machine. It sounds like a fabulous thing, and when it first came out, it was, because people had never seen anything like it.
I don't know if other people are as rewarded by it, but you're overcoming tremendous challenges. There's nothing that's easy to do on the 2600. And you're winning, right? I love winning.
And the other thing that's fun about playing them still is that they're all 60 frames a second. They have to hit that or the screen won't draw, So they're all even much better than I think consoles that came out a few years afterwards. They all feel really fast when you play them. No Atari game has any sort of lag or anything because they had no option to have lag.
It's like when today, in hindsight, people criticize the first screen of Donkey Kong on the 2600. When I finished that screen, I thought it was a miracle. And you get people on Facebook today saying it's the biggest piece of junk I ever saw. And you just have to understand the perspective of where you were at the time.
The programmers that worked with that machine were magicians.
So Adventure was a really popular product, and we were there was some vibe around maybe a sequel to Adventure. And somewhere in there, I got the idea of doing a series of games that were contests with comic books with real prizes made by Franklin Mint. We were part of Warner Communications, and somewhere along there, we had started to be doing bits of comic books with the games. And because Warner Communications owned DC Comics. Warner Communications, I happen to know, I don't know that anyone else was paying attention, also owned Franklin Mint, right? Franklin Mint being a collectible company. I don't know, they made plates and little figurines and stuff, I know, and medallions, and not my scene, but it's a creative world. It's hard to talk about this without going me, me, me. I don't love going me, 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 but a lot of it was, I consider myself to basically have been the showrunner of Sword Quest. The concept was mine, the literary concept, the material. So the games are actually moderately literate and erudite, right? The whole story is put together as a lot like a Grail quest or something in Joseph Campbell. It would be a hero's journey, a spiritual evolution, a life. It's a story of a life, of a energetic, a magical life, right, through these mystical systems. So I embedded it in a lot of historical culture of mysticism, and sold the idea, and it went over big. It was brave, it was ambitious, it was audacious, and it had a certain je ne sais quoi, but I don't know what it is. I'll back up a little bit. There was kind of a bizarre effort to do a combination of Twitch and adventure game, to merge and to create an action adventure. I think Howard tried this in Raiders, right, where he tried to make an adventure game that was built into an action game and merge the two. So I consider Howard and I to be some of the pioneers of action adventure. Got to say this in a certain way. So you'd play this action game and maybe get a clue, a prize that you'd add to your inventory. And if you had that in your inventory, then you could unlock, then you'd be on this map. You wouldn't necessarily see the map, but you'd be inside a maze, and a door would open in the maze, and there'd be another action game there. And so it was kind of like a first-person adventure with action elements. That was basically, and I got looking back at it when I say it that way and knowing what was in the times, it was very audacious. And it was actually very creative. It was really, it was really cool.
5200 was a tragedy. The 5200 was a good idea gone horribly wrong.
The big problem that we had at Atari, the thing that killed the industry more than any other one thing, even more possibly than the E.T. video game, is that it was the first product life cycle. No one had ever been through a major success video game console life cycle. So where does it end? Nowadays, when somebody comes out with a new system, they already are designing the next system because they know the life of a system. They know a console is good for a certain number of years, and then it's going to die, it's going to fall off, and that's when we need to be ready and prepared to come in with a new system. Holy crap, you know, our first machine is finally falling off the cliff. We need something. We have something. We can take the 400, 800 computer, repackages the 5200, and spit it out, and we can do it.
So the 5200 was basically what the 400, 800 was going to be 3 years before. It's a tough business. Business is cruel. And you know, like I say, I'll say it again, it was the first time anything was being done. No one knew.
And what happened was the Atari 5200, it grew very large because marketing wanted perceived value, so bigger was better in some respects. And then marketing got really focused on the Intellivision, and Intellivisions had a bunch of buttons. They had a keypad, and they had this disc with 12 distinct regions. And so, hey, if we put an analog stick here, and one that doesn't self-center was the great idea, this will be a better marketing message than the Intellivision controller. And of course, it was a horrible experience. The company lost focus on what was important, and it was gameplay's important. You know, good games sell, bad games don't. If you've got a bad control mechanism, doesn't matter how good the graphics are. It's not going to be fun to play.
Now what do you do? So, and that was the thing. Engineering we really wanted to do something cool, right? We wanted to do like a real next generation because the 400, 800 was already last generation.
The engineering team and the creative team, the game designers, we were so upset, and we all felt that we were making a wrong decision with this controller, that we put together a petition to upper management, and we just explained that, you know, this is a great product, the control is lacking, we've got some other alternatives we want you to see, and my name's number 3 on the list of the petitioners.
See, I wasn't someone who signed petitions so much as talked to people behind the scenes, because I always felt that was more like the way you operate in a corporation. And but I definitely put the word out whenever I could that, like, you know, this is something we either should have done a few years ago or, you know, can't really do now.
We told marketing, hey, we could make this 2600 compatible. They didn't want anything to do with that. They said they must be very separate and distinct. We can't have backwards compatibility, which at the time we thought might be a great feature. It's a good way to get people that have these Atari games already and keep them on the Atari platform instead of giving them an opportunity to jump to another platform. And so we designed the product specifically so that you could never have 2600 compatibility. About 2 months before launch, they demanded 2600 compatibility. And at that time, we had to build an adapter. And then we actually had to modify consoles that were already made, the first ones, to work with this adapter. And we called this thing the piggyback parasite. We were just horribly embarrassed by that situation. That never should have happened.
There was some big time denial, you know, around Atari, because nobody wants their parade rained on. And when it's the best parade you've ever imagined in your life, nobody wants to see a cloud. You just don't want to see it. So we didn't.
Humanoid. Intruder alert. Humanoid data intruder. Humanoid data intruder. Intruder alert. Intruder alert. Humanoid data intruder. Filter intruder. Intruder alert. Humanoid data intruder. Intruder alert. Intruder. Fight like a robot. Destroy target. Intruder alert. Humanoid data intruder. Attack it. Humanoid data intruder.
families are learning about home computers. The family with the Atari home computer is learning
Spanish, German,
French,
Italian.
The other,
No foreign languages.
the Atari family is learning
3 programs teach us to program.
the other.
We've only one.
And while the Atari family learns to play Centipede Star Raiders and soon,
E.T.
the other learned
We made a mistake.
over 1,000 programs featuring the world's most popular games, but sorry, only with Atari.
I remember sitting in the room with Jack, and Jack saying to all of us, let's go back to our roots. Let's do at least one more game system.
The controller is quirky. The industrial design of both the CD and the main unit are quirky. And the fact that, like, I guess somebody used the tooling on the main unit to make some kind of dental device. Like, it just has like this weird, quirky history that I think is also inviting.
One of the most interesting things about the architecture of Jaguar was this notion of having the Motorola 68000, which basically was responsible for booting and housekeeping, and then the Tom and Jerry chips.
I mean, I think at the time, 68000 was still a strong processor, but obviously it was in the Genesis and other things, so you weren't really getting that true 64-bit experience. But I think there's games out there that took advantage.
There's so many features in Jaguar that for a developer like Jeff Minter that did Tempest 2000 for Jaguar was like, wow, give me this.
I would say other than Cybermorph, it did not necessarily feel like that quantum leap that we were promised. It wasn't the flying cars, as they say, that we would have in the future, but you could see the potential, and that's what was really cool. You could see the parts of Cybermorph. You're like, oh, fully 3D world compared to something like maybe a Star Fox, which was on rails.
My perspective is the rule of thirds, where if you want to wind up with one really, really great game, you need to lay down 9 bets, because out of those 9, 1/3 probably will ship. And out of those 3 games, one is going to be a hit, the other will be, and the other probably might be a dinger. Yeah. You know, there just wasn't enough momentum behind the Jaguar at that time to be able to do that when Sega and Nintendo were basically already on their 3.5 generation of consoles, you know, at those times.
I mean, if Aliens vs. Predator came out as a launch title, maybe the history of the Atari Jaguar might have been slightly different. I think there are a lot more Jaguar fans today than there were when the system actually came out, and it's cool to see people enjoying the system some 20 odd years later. I believe everybody appreciated the innovative aspect, but on the other hand, the software was late, some of it was a little janky. But I think just saying, you know, time heals all wounds, to go onto the Jaguar forums now and look at the love for the system, honestly, like somebody that worked on it, I can't say that I completely understand it, but I totally appreciate it. I'm like, where were you guys like 20 or 30 years ago? You know, like you would have made my life like a heck of a lot better.
When you have a tragedy, and I do believe that the fall of the video game industry in the early 80s was a tragedy. It was a tragedy to many, many people. It changed a lot of lives.
I think it's pretty obvious when it comes to the video game crash that Atari didn't have control over the quality.
I mean, it needed some sort of way to keep just anybody from writing cartridges for it.
And so many people saw this video game gold rush, and they just, started dumping crap. I remember going into KB toy stores and just seeing, really bad box art and just really just terrible looking games. And that's when I started losing interest, and the market became flooded just with garbage. And it ultimately led to, of course, things like E.T. being, actually buried in the desert like garbage.
And what happened was that E.T. became the face of the crash of the video game industry, and I, of course, was the butt behind the face. That's kind of the way it went.
Greed and hubris, that's what undid Atari. If they just had worked more from a place of like focusing on making great games and delivering great games to the customer instead of like, how can we maximize revenue, I feel like they'd still be a huge powerhouse today.
Frankly, Warner did not understand technology. He didn't understand the consumer marketplace, the video game, and Ray Kassar, I think was afraid of releasing new product because it might not be as successful as VCS. So that's a sure way to fail. And
I regret that we didn't have a new console by '84 that would have made it so that Atari continued to be a really viable business.
We never, ever got down to ever having any process by which we could come up with a better system.
Even to today, I think people do believe that, like, if they had just released like the 5200 earlier, or if they released the 7800, or they had done different things, they would could never have they would have survived the crash a lot better, and they would be like a powerhouse today. Like as a kid, I didn't know much about business, but I just felt like something was wrong.
No one knew anything. Certainly, no one knew how to replace an existing console with a new one.
The real one-liner about why the game industry crashed and went away is that it was a first product life cycle and nobody knew what to do.